Good evening and welcome to a community forum, a panel discussion on anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and what we as a community can do. I'd like to thank the North Shore Television for televising this forum. I'd also like to thank Young Israel Synagogue, Nassau County, the Anti-Semitism Task Force, our co-hosts, which are in no particular order, Great Neck Synagogue, of course, Young Israel Synagogue, Voices for Truth, United Mashadi Community, Beth Hadassah Synagogue, Jewish Community Relations Council, Shai, Temple Bethel, the JCC, Stand With Us, Uprooted Justice, and Ahavat Shalom Synagogue. This forum is an outgrowth from the Combating Anti-Semitism Task Force enacted by the Nassau County Legislature and signed into law by County Executive Bruce Blakeman. The legislation was co-authored by Legislator Mazi Phillip of Great Neck, who is on our panel this evening. So let's do our introductions for our panelists this evening. The first one, Stand With Us Director Avi Poznick, right to my left. Probably the greatest crime fighter I've ever seen in my life. Batman has nothing over him. Our Nassau County Police Commissioner, Pat Ryder. Our special guest, dynamite individual, speaker on issues revolving around Jew hatred, Zionism, Jewish empowerment. He also has started this series called We Were Never Lost. An absolutely outstanding individual. He came here from Miami this morning, via Israel, and that is our special guest, Rudy Rochman. Of course, our local county legislator, Operation Solomon Child, American, Ethiopian, Israeli, county legislator, Mazi Phillip. And the immediate past chair of the Holocaust Museum, Executive Board of Voices for Truth, and a global leader for March of the Living, and that is Andrea Bollander. And my name is Scott Cushing. I'm a columnist for the Times of Israel on anti-Semitism, Zionism, and Israeli issues. And this is our forum. To start the evening, I would like to introduce Rabbi Ismach to open this very special discussion. Rabbi, please welcome Rabbi Ismach.
Thank you, Scott. I wish I could say it's a pleasure to see you all here. It's a pleasure, of course, to see the diverse crowd, the community leaders. It's a pleasure to have to be honored by the presence of our panelists this evening, but it's not a pleasure to be here to speak about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism and the sensation that we as Jews have that there's something in the air, there's something that's changed, there's something that's different. There's no pleasure in considering that and thinking about that, and even in the conversation that we're going to have tonight about it, however productive it is. And it makes me think of something which is also not so pleasant, and that's the fact that Passover is in 3 weeks. Passover being in 3 weeks puts a little bit of anxiety and stress, I think, into the hearts and minds of all of the Jewish people in the room, because there's a lot and it's overwhelming. But we know that 3 weeks from now, we will be sitting together and singing a song. And one of those songs that we sing that night, and my understanding is that that song is sung with similar tunes, whether you're from Ashkenazic or Sephardic tradition, is the song with which we raise our glass and we say, V'hisha amda lavotenu v'lanu. This principle, this promise has stood for us throughout the generations. Shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalosenu. That it wasn't just Pharaoh and his minions and his people who attempted to destroy and to enslave the Jewish people. Ella shebechol dar vadar omdim aleinu l'chalosenu. In every generation, there will be people, even in the best of times. For the Jewish people, they will sometimes suffer the worst of times. And that promise has always shocked me. It's almost frightening when we read it in the Seder, and it's shocking that we lift up a glass as if to celebrate it. What's even more odd is the tune. Most traditions have a ditty. Dun, 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 dun. We're singing this as if this is something which is joyous. And it took me a long time, it took me well into my adulthood to realize that the reason we sing and the reason we raise our glass is because of the last line. V'hakadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam. We have incredible faith that in spite of whatever it is that we face, in spite of these challenges, in spite of this generational phenomenon, Hakadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam. We will discuss, we will think of practical solutions, we will come up with suggestions, to-do lists, of course we will converse. But we know in our hearts that it's the faith that we have in God that has brought us this far, and our ancestors were always capable of lifting a glass for this message. Now, the most important message, I think, when you look around this room, is a comment made 200 years ago by Yehuda Leib Alter, the Sfat Emet. He said that if you read the line carefully, he says that this room is the solution. Shelo echad bilvad amar aleinu l'chalosenu. He says that Shelo echad, when we are not one, when we are not unified, when we are not together, that is what rises up against us to threaten us. It is the condition of disunity. It is the separation that exists within our community. It is that sentiment which leads to the greatest threat that we can face. May convenings such as this, may the fact that we are able to put a couple hundred people in a room to think about this, to talk about this from different and diverse communities and congregations, may that be the greatest merit, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu mi'adam, may God hear our prayers, and may our efforts be considered, and may all of these threats diminish entirely.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now let's begin. This panel will be a free-flowing panel. There will be questions that will be posed to them. But before the actual panel discussion, I thought you would like to know about each panelist from their own words. And so as a matter of introduction, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to share their background with our audience and our viewers who will be watching at home. Tonight, I thought we would start with our special guest, and that is Rudy Rochman. Rudy is, as we all know, on the front lines of this subject matter. He's on social media under the name of Rudy_Israel. His latest venture, the outstanding series, We Were Never Lost. Rudy has walked the walk and has literally done it with blood, sweat, and tears himself. And so without any further ado, I'd like to invite Rudy up to the podium. And as I said, you flew in here today, and we can't thank you enough for being a part of this forum. Let's please welcome Rudy Rochman.
So I guess we didn't start on Persian time, because we started rather on time. I thought I was coming to Great Neck. So I just flew in. I was in Israel. I live in Israel. I spoke in Miami, and now I'm here in New York. I was actually supposed to be in Berkeley today debating students on campus, but we pushed that off 1 week. So I was asked to share a little bit about my personal story, what made me become an activist, the current situations in the political and intellectual spaces, and a little bit about what's going on with anti-Semitism in our generation. So my name is Rudy. I was born in France, but all of my grandparents were born in different countries, and all of my grandparents were kicked out of the countries they lived in due to the rise of Jew hatred in their societies. On my mom's side of the family, they were born in Morocco and Algeria. In 1948, as a response to the creation of Israel, there was a mob that decided to commit a pogrom on Ujda, which was the village where my grandparents were living. Many people were killed, and my grandparents fled to France. My father's side of the family, my grandparents were born in Poland and Belgium and were able to survive the Holocaust by fleeing to France and hiding in attics to survive the war. So growing up, being born in France, second generation, I really asked myself, why are all these Jews identifying as Moroccan, as Russian, as German, as Ethiopian even, as Algerian, as British, when we were living in those places, we were not a part of those societies. We were not Moroccan in Morocco. We were not Ethiopian in Ethiopia. We were not German in Germany. We were not Russian in Russia. And so I started asking myself, really, what do I identify when someone asks me, where am I from? This continued when my family decided to move to Israel when I was 3, then to Miami when I was 5. And for those of you who have been to Miami, it's the most, I would say, un-American place in America. No one identifies as American. You're Argentinian, Venezuelan, Colombian, Haitian, Jamaican. And growing up, I was always labeled the French kid. But when I'd visit my family in France, I was all of a sudden the American cousin. And I went to a Jewish day school. My dad is technically Ashkenazi, although he says that he converted to Sephardic when he married my mom, Baruch Hashem. And my mom is Sephardic, and I was raised fully Sephardic. But going to a Jewish day school, the rabbis would say, oh, you have a last name that's Rochman. Your dad's technically Ashkenazi, so you have to go to the Ashkenazi minyan. And I'd have to explain, listen, I wasn't raised with gefilte fish and with Yiddish. I was raised with tabule and dafina and alabina in the wedding. So you don't get to impose onto me how I practice my culture. And I had this constant struggle of debate because apparently who I was depending on who was asking me the question or where the question was being asked. And from there, I wanted to find my own answer. And something happened to me as a young child that I talk about often when people ask for me to share my story. It's something that happened to me when I was a 7-year-old. I took a trip to London with my mom and my younger brother. We got onto the red tour bus that does the tour of London. And before getting onto the bus, my mom was wearing a shirt in Hebrew that said Emet. For those who don't know Hebrew, Emet means truth. And as we got onto the bus driver, who ended up being a neo-Nazi, sees my mom's shirt and says, excuse me, is that written in Jewish? My mom says, no, it's written in Hebrew, but it's the language of the Jewish people, if that's what you're asking. He says, oh, so you guys are Jews? It's like, yeah, we're Jews, what's the problem? He says, get off my bus, I don't want any Jews. And my mom, being a strong fire sign, Leo, Sephardic woman, said, I don't know who you think you are, we're not getting off this bus. And he got up, grabbed my mom, and threw her off. And in that moment, I wasn't prepared. Everything within me wanted to do something. But I also recognized that I'm a 7-year-old, and this big neo-Nazi, there's nothing that I can do. Eventually, there are people that got involved, that witnessed that situation. The police got called, the guy got arrested. But that moment changed my life. The first thing that it taught me is that the next time I would deal with any form of darkness or injustice, especially against my own people, I'd have to be prepared. I'd have to know how to defend myself, whether that be physically, emotionally, intellectually, even ideologically, understanding the greater ideas behind the ideas that people in front of me were pushing. And the second thing that this moment did for me is it taught me who I was. Because I realized that it didn't matter where I was born, grew up, lived in, traveled to, what piece of paper we call a passport today says. What mattered was that I was a Jew. So I asked myself even deeper questions. What does it mean to be a Jew in the first place? In our generation, the way that we use English as a language, we say that Judaism is our religion. But outside of the Jewish context, the way the world defines the word religion, in fact, the way it's defined in the dictionary, is as a belief system in a God, deity, book, or a prophet. So if one does not believe in the God, deity, book, or a prophet, they're not a part of a religion. Hence, a Christian who doesn't believe in Jesus is not a Christian. A Muslim who doesn't believe in Muhammad and the Quran is not a Muslim. A Buddhist that doesn't identify with the philosophies of Buddha is not a Buddhist. Be it a Jew, even if you don't believe in Torah and Hashem, which is a fundamental part of our culture and identity and way of life for thousands of years, you're still a Jew. So it's not a wandering ideology that crossed over borders and nations. It's a physical people, an ancient civilization that was forcibly kicked out from their native homeland. And in order to preserve their identity, they created a portable suitcase called Judaism. And within that suitcase, we packed in our traditions, our culture, our language, our aspirations, our spirituality, our belief in Hashem, our purpose in this world, the experiences, the holidays, everything inside, and passed it down, ledor vador, generation to generation, with the aspiration of Shana Ba B'Yerushalayim. One day we will come back and revive that. And from that moment on, I realized that when someone is asking me, where am I from? They're not asking me necessarily where I was born, where did I grow up, where do I currently live, what passports do I have, where my parents were born, or my grandparents were born, because I particularly have different answers for all those questions. They're asking me, what people and land do you connect to? And I think every single Jew, when we're asked where we're from, we should answer very clearly. The reason why we are called Jews is because we come from a land that at that time was called Judea when we were displaced. That land is also called Israel, and every single Jew is from Israel. How are we supposed to expect the world to understand that Israel is the home of the Jewish people, even when we are asked who we are and where we're from, we don't answer that clearly? When I was 17, I graduated from high school. I decided to go to Israel, served in the IDF, served as a paratrooper, served in the snipers and the paratroopers. And when I finished the army, I decided to do school in the United States. I decided to start university in Los Angeles, the other Persian capital of America. I was at Santa Monica College and UCLA at the same time. I did 2 years worth of school in 1 year. And this was in 2013, where I would say most of the Jewish world was not really talking about yet about anti-Semitism on campuses. You had few organizations, Stand With Us included, that was out there speaking about different things happening. But most of the institutional Jewish world was saying, ignore the problem. And when I got to college campuses, and this really represents the ideological problem on the mainstream, I realized that there were groups on campus that claimed to be pro-Palestinian. And the reason I say they claim to be pro-Palestinian is because when Palestinians are dying by the thousands in the Syrian civil war, when they're by the hundreds of thousands of refugee camps in Lebanon or in Jordan, suffering on the border of Gaza and Egypt, or suffering under Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, they don't talk about those Palestinians. They only talk about genuine Palestinian suffering only when it has to do with Israel. And of course, cherry-picked and taken out of context in order to use that and to manipulate that in order to push an agenda against Israel and the Jewish people. And the way they spread that agenda is using a tool called intersectionality. And this is happening all over pop culture. They would go to all the different minority groups on college campuses and convince them that their source of suffering and struggle was the same thing that the Jews were doing to the Palestinians, which is very important to understand how historically anti-Semitism has functioned. You find the source of struggle and suffering of a community, and you find a way to connect that to the Jewish people. So they would go to the Black Student Union on campus and say, oh, you suffer from police brutality and racism. Oh, well, we suffer from IDF brutality and Israeli racism. Native American and some white colonials came and stole your land. They would say, oh, well, the Jews are a bunch of fake white people from Europe who came and stole our land. Women, you don't have equal rights. We don't have equal rights. And they tried to convince every single minority group on campuses that their source of struggle was not only what they were facing, but somehow connected to Israel. They even went as far as to say that the reason for why there's even police brutality in America is because the IDF trains the New York State Police Department to kill black people. Now, we find that funny because we obviously know that it's not true. But the reality is that when students hear this, they think it's true. They don't hear anyone else saying anything else. And how did they even get to this conclusion? Because you had an Israeli who was 40 years old who gave a Kav Maga class to one precinct one time. And because this Israeli had served in the IDF like everyone else 20 years before, and this precinct was connected to the police, which is connected to historic police brutality, they made with the two connections, and somehow Israel's responsible for the problems of another community. And I realized that this is what was happening, and I started looking within. What are we doing about it? You know, we talk about a lot the counter movement to the Jewish people, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, but what about the Jews? What about us, our own community? What are we doing about it? And I realized, I started asking questions to the different groups on campus, and I realized that we were doing an event once in a blue moon in the Hillel, in the Chabad, in the API house, in the already safe Jewish spaces. And we would talk about very shallow things about Israel. Israel created the cherry tomatoes, drip irrigation, startup nation, the USB, all these cool things that Israel has created, but it doesn't answer the fundamental question. The fundamental question being asked today in society, whether it's campuses or in politics or in media or wherever it is who are the Jewish people and why does Israel have a right to exist? And we are not a people because we created a small tomato for a salad, and we don't have a right to exist because we invented an application on our phones. We have to start answering the question to the audience that's asking the question, not just speaking to ourselves. I started going to the different Jewish leaders in Los Angeles, heads of federations, presidents of organizations, rabbis, and I asked them, listen, there's a wave of anti-Semitism that's coming. Most of you don't see it, but it's coming, and we need to wake up, and we need to do something about it. And what did I hear in response? Don't worry about it. It'll go away. If you do something, it'll get worse. No, we have it under control. We're lobbying the presidents, and we're lobbying the congressmen, and we're going to do a top-down approach. But the problem with a top-down approach, if you don't also have a bottom-up approach, is that the future people voting in those politicians or the future individuals who will go and be politicians, if they have a view that they think the source of the problem in the world is the Jewish people in Israel, good luck with your top-down approach because it's very limited in time. And it reminded me when I heard these answers from these leaders that are supposed to be the ones that guide us, that encourage us to go out. It reminded me of something that I had learned when I took a trip called March of the Living. Andrea over there at the end of the panel was a person that was on that trip with me as a 17-year-old. And there was something that was done on my trip that I wish was done on other trips as well. You know, of course, I was ready, my half of my family on my father's side was completely exterminated in the Shoah. So it's not a new topic for me. But something that I really appreciated from that trip is in the bus rides that we had, they gave us a packet of letters. And these letters were different letters written by different Jewish leaders, heads of federations and organizations and rabbis, in the decade leading to the Holocaust. Meaning it wasn't overnight where the Jews are a part of society and the next day they're being killed. There was an evolution of anti-Semitism. And what were Jewish leaders at the time saying to each other as anti-Semitism was rising? And you could read, don't worry about it, it'll go away. If you do something, it'll just get worse. You even had certain organizations and rabbis making the argument that they needed to financially support Hitler because anyways he was going to be in power, so might as well have that financial relationship. And I find myself in 2013 after the army, seeing anti-Semitism rising and realizing we're doing the exact same thing. And this is the moment that I realized that the problem here is not how strong the anti-Israel movement is, it's how weak or non-existent the Israel movement is. In that time, I had a few friends of mine that were also students at Santa Monica College, which is a transfer university, and I kept hearing a theme. I kept hearing, no, I'm not gonna go to that school, it's too anti-Semitic. No, I'm not gonna go to that school, there's too much anti-Zionism. Even the parents of my peers, sending my kids over there, what are you, crazy? No way. And I realized if we don't go to those places, who's gonna go for us? If we don't make that change, who's gonna make that change for us? If we go back 60, 70 years ago, in this country, women didn't have equal rights. Black people didn't have equal rights. You think that society changed overnight without a fight? Rights are earned. And the Jewish people are the only people who are demanding to get rights without earning them. And in order to earn them, we have to shift pop culture. And we have to take this matter seriously. And it's not only talking about that anti-Semitism exists, it's understanding how it's portrayed, how it works, and how to be actually able to stand up and not just make excuses because we talked about it, that we feel good with ourselves. Because I heard so many people refusing to take action, refusing to go to certain universities because it was too hard, I decided to go on Google and I typed in #1 most anti-Semitic university in North America. That year, Columbia University was listed #1. So I decided to transfer to Columbia. And there I created a grassroots student movement that focused on empowering the Jewish students, on narrating the story of Israel and the Jewish people, and on protecting the Jewish people. Now let me break that down. A lot of us Jews went through Jewish education or had connections within the communities, JCCs, Chabad, etc. We were taught how to put tefillin, which I put every morning, how to light the candles, how to do kiddush that I've never missed in my life, how to keep kosher, how to dress, how to act. We were not given the tools about how to be Jews in practice, how to stand up for yourself, how to have the courage, how to remain calm, how to be able to defend yourself physically if you're in a situation, how to defend yourself ideologically, how to be able to answer someone who's on the extreme right or the extreme left, how to know all the counter narratives against us. Why were we not given those tools so that when we're sent out into this world, it's not only about practicing Judaism, but putting Judaism into practice? So we focus on training the Jewish students and the allies on how to be strong. The second thing is it was our responsibility to narrate the story of Israel. And we realized that we need to understand the audience in front of us. Maybe an older generation spoke the language of accomplishments and facts, but that's definitely not the language of the younger generation. The younger generation speaks a language of human stories that make the world a better place. So what is the story of Israel and the Jewish people? The story of Israel is a story of a 4,000-year-old native civilization that was forcefully exiled by a white imperial nation called the Romans. Even during our displacement, we maintained a constant presence in our homeland. And after thousands of years of persecution and extermination, we created the most successful indigenous liberation movement that ever existed, where for the first time in history, a native people not only came home, decolonized their civilization, decolonized their tongues, bringing back Hebrew, kicked off the oppressive colonial force being the British, and created a model of light and success to all minorities and indigenous peoples throughout the world. And when you talk about Israel in that language, you have to understand your audience and how they resonate. The last thing we focused on is any movement that was on the extreme right or extreme left that was seeking to make Israel, the Jewish people, seem as the source of the problem. We made sure to be there, to make sure to get the society, the students, everyone around, to recognize that this is something wrong. I want to close by saying a little extra about anti-Semitism. an additional point that's more from a mystical perspective, because I've constantly been asking myself since I'm young, why does everyone hate us? Why did that person who kicked me and my mother and my younger brother off of the bus when I was 7, he doesn't know us. If he knew us, he would actually like us. Why? Why were we blamed for every single problem? You go to the far right, they see us as the left. You go to the far left, they see us as the right. You go to the black supremacists, the Farrakhan's, they see us as the problem. The white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, they see us as the problem. You ask the communists, we're the capitalists. You ask the capitalists, we're the communists. Why is it that the one thing that every single extreme group agrees on throughout time and throughout borders is that the Jew is the problem? We didn't kill Jesus, we're blamed for the death of Jesus. We didn't do the Black Plague, we're blamed for the Black Plague. We didn't create the economic situation post-World War I, we're blamed for that too. Why is it? We're blamed for literally everything that happens. So I'm asking myself, okay, I know that we didn't do it. I'm an insider, I can say. So maybe we're not doing something that we're supposed to do. Maybe it's not what we're doing, maybe it's what we're not doing. What are we supposed to do as the Jewish people becomes the question. Well, we have a mission statement as a nation, as a civilization. It's Tikkun Olam and Or Lagoim. We need to heal the world, and we need to be a light upon other nations. Let's say the world is a body, and every nation has its own function. And it's not binary. One nation can play the role of 3 body parts, and 2 nations can share the role of the same one. What is the role within the human body that the Jewish people chose to play? Tikkun Olam and Or Lagoim. We heal the body, and we allow the other organs to achieve their potential and their greatness in creation. What within the body does that? Some people say the heart. Well, the heart allows the body to work, but it doesn't heal the body. It's not the brain. It's the immune system. The immune system's responsibility is to heal the body and to allow the other organs to function and to achieve their potential. Now, when the immune system doesn't work, which as a nation, we're not actually correcting this world, what happens? The rest of the world blames us for all the problems that exist. Because when the immune system fails, it's not the immune system that causes disease, but it's the immune system's responsibility to prevent the diseases from happening. To give you another analogy to help you understand, imagine you have a plane in the sky, and you have a flight from Israel to JFK. And in that flight, on the way, there's someone that's having a heart attack in economy class. And the flight attendant gets up and realizes, wow, Dr. Cohen is in business class. He's the greatest cardiologist. Amazing, he's gonna save the life of this guy who's having a heart attack. And she runs to Dr. Cohen and says, Dr. Cohen, there's a guy having a heart attack, come and save him. And Dr. Cohen gets up, takes his bag with all the things that he needs in order to save this guy's life, and rushes over to economy class, sees the guy having a heart attack, looks at him and does nothing. And the guy dies. Now, did Dr. Cohen kill this person? No. But how do you think everyone else feels? How do you think the families of the person that died feels? Subconsciously, we need to realize that the world understands that we have a role to play. And when we don't play that role, whether they say it to us or not, we get blamed for the consequences of not playing our role. And that's how anti-Semitism works. Now, if we want to fight it, we need to stand up. We need to be empowered. We need to shift pop culture. But if you really want to heal it and not just deal with the symptoms, we have to realize that we have a role to play into this world, and we have to start tapping into it. We've come back to our home. We've brought back Hebrew. We're back into the vehicle. And now it's time to drive it to its destination. Toda rabba.
Thank you, Rudy. That was absolutely inspiring. Our first panelist I'd like to introduce is our county legislator, Mazi Phillip.
Thank you so much. Rudy, you are amazing. You are inspiring. I follow you on Instagram, and I learn every day what you're doing on the ground, fighting anti-Semitism. As a proud Jew, it's just amazing, and thank you for coming. You can hear? Okay, sorry. Thank you so much again. First of all, I would like to thank all of you. The fact that you are here It shows how this matter is important to you. And I would love to thank Rabbi Yismach and Young Israel, all the organization, all the synagogue, for helping me to host this event. So, no question about the fact that anti-Semitism on the rise. We have seen the highest number of anti-Semitism incidents in US. Act of assault, vandalism, violence, harassment, we're seeing all. And I think today, Jewish people, they are the most targeted group of people in this country. So what we can do, and I agree with Rudy, we have to start to educate and empower our community. We need to send a message. Hate and anti-Semitism is not acceptable in our country. And we have to make it clear. It doesn't matter if you are Republican or Democrat or independent. The message is hate doesn't have a home in this country. We need to continue to support legislative efforts to combat anti-Semitism in local, state, and the federal level. And we should continue to promote Holocaust education. Here in Nassau County, we passed the first bill to establish the first task force fighting anti-Semitism. And we are working with law enforcement, with our Commissioner, Patrick Ryder, and educators and advocacy group around the county to fight anti-Semitism. Tonight's event is basically the result of the task force that we established a year ago. The idea is to talk about this. Tonight, you're gonna hear from all of us, but we also would love to hear from you. And I believe by sending a strong message that we are united under this issue, and it's gonna help us to come up with better ideas to fight anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Mazi. Our next panelist needs no introduction. That's our Police Commissioner, Pat Ryder.
So after hearing Rudy speak, I'm trying to figure out why the Irish Catholic kid is up here. But I am truly honored to be your commissioner, because as an Irish Catholic, I don't police by my religion, I police by my security threats. Nobody in this county is more threatened than the Jewish community. Nobody needs more protection than the Jewish community. 2 weeks ago, there was a day of hate throughout the nation. That was done by a white supremacist neo-Nazi group, just as we heard Rudy talk about. And their target was propaganda to push out through the community to put fear in you as you go to pray on the Sabbath. My job, my men and women of the police department, Catholics, Jewish, Muslim police officers, was there to protect you that day. And we showed that in our force. We had more police officers. We had more police officers on the street that day than we ever had. And we were not going to let it. The county exec, a Jewish county exec, the first Jewish county executive, said to me clearly, you will not let this happen to our communities. No matter what the religion is, we will not. When it comes to hate, it's a zero tolerance. When it comes to protection, we got your back. We will always have your back, and that is our promise to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up panelist, Andrea Bollander.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me here. I have my family here, my little baby brother and his wife. And I want to thank Rudy for coming all the way from Miami, and thank you all for welcoming us. I'm here tonight as a human, but I'm also here as number 86786. I represent my father. My father was a Holocaust survivor, the sole survivor of his family from Auschwitz. I kept his name because that is the only thing he was allowed to keep. And I want all of you to know that no matter how many times we go on the March of the Living, no matter how many times we talk about it, it's the action that goes with it. So we have to be out there. We have to be talking about it. We have to be proud. And every day that I leave my house, it's with something that represents me as a Jew. And I did meet Rudy on the March of the Living. It's something that I've been doing for a dozen years, and for the most part, I was guided by Irving Roth, Zichron Lavracha, who many of you remember. And this will be our first March of the Living back without him. But I will be taking him with me on my shoulder, telling me, teaching me. And I want all of you to remember, be out there, be proud, don't be scared. My younger brother might not remember this, but when I was probably in my young teens, my father used to run out in the middle of the night when many people from the JDL used to get arrested, and he used to bring kosher food to jail. And that was his part, but he was the only survivor of his family, and he had 4 children to raise. So I want you all to understand that day of hate, the fact that you were all out, and thank you, Patty, for Commissioner Ryder for being there. Be out there. Don't be scared. Yes, it is frightening, but we need to stand together, and we need to practice, whether it's observance or whether it's just being a proud Jew. Something Rudy put on his Instagram a few months ago really stuck with me, and I hope I can quote you efficiently. Jews who trade assimilation for survival shall have neither. And that really resonated with me, is that we don't need to trade assimilation, and we shouldn't. And we should be out there and go see. I just saw Leopoldstadt with my daughter, and I cried through the whole thing because it reminded me that 1899 Austria is 2023 New York. Okay? All that is in addition is the social media. So as Rudy said, yes, we have to be where the kids are. We have to be where they're learning. And we have to take pop culture and make them see that we are not only an asset to our culture, but an asset to the world and to our own families. And I appreciate you here. A survivor once said to me, they had weapons of mass destruction. We have weapons of mass instruction. Let's use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And our last panelist to introduce himself, Avi Poznick with International's Stand With Us.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a pleasure to be on this distinguished panel. My name is Avi Poznick. I'm the Northeast Director for Stand With Us, which is an education organization that supports students, especially our students, to support Israel and fight anti-Semitism. These are the future leaders. These are the future politicians. These are the future policymakers. And the sooner we're able to educate and empower them, the better our tomorrow is. Just a little bit about myself real quickly. I grew up and live on the South Shore of Long Island, so I appreciate being welcomed here on the North Shore. And I think there are 2 people who really inspired me to do what I do today. One of them is my mother, who's not in this room right now. But she is someone who always said you cannot live life for yourself, and you always have to give back. And after suffering 2 pregnancy losses, before my brother, myself, and my sister were born, she gave back. She was able to counsel over 400 women who also experienced pregnancy loss. The second is my high school principal. I went to Rambam High School in Lawrence, and this was a school where they not only taught Zionism, but we organized demonstrations outside the homes of Nazi war criminals living in the United States. And many of those, I think if not most of them, were already started the extradition process and sent back to stand trial, to ensure that our communities never forget and ensure that the younger generation, we as students at the time and students of today, never forget, and not just that they are taught what happened during the Holocaust, and taught what was anti-Semitism like in 1943, but what does it look like today in 2023? And this is a message that we are imparting to our students and to our communities.
Thank you, Avi. So thank you to our panelists. Let's jump right into this. On The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Steven Spielberg recently said, anti-Semitism is no longer lurking, but standing proud like the 1930s Germany. This was on Stephen Colbert's show, The Late Show. Locally, in Oceanside, we have anti-Semitic flyers that have been thrown on lawns to menace Jews, playground equipment defaced with swastikas, as the police commissioner said, a day of hate, which was a direct threat at schools and Jewish institutions. We had a young man who many of the people on this particular panel know very well, probably many in this room, Joey Borgen from Nassau County, was beaten within an inch of his life for being a Jew. Let me repeat that. He was beaten within an inch of his life just for being a Jew. And we had a great neck businessman who was jumped and assaulted for simply being a Jew in Brooklyn, where he was doing his business. So it begs the question for our entire panel, is anti-Semitism standing proud today, as Steven Spielberg said? So I'd like to lead off with Rudy.
So I think all of us in this room know that anti-Semitism is a problem and it's growing, but there's a formula behind anti-Semitism. Thankfully, we have 4,000 years of history, so with that history comes an understanding of when things go up and when things go down. And throughout Jewish history, whenever the Jews are strong, empowered, know who they are, and are fulfilling their purpose, we overcome the greatest of obstacles and the worst of civilizations that have come to destroy us. Whenever the Jewish people are divided and assimilating and forgetting what their purpose are and going away from that purpose, that is the moment that anti-Semitism rises. I think as a generation of Am Yisrael, doesn't matter if we're young or old, all of us are here today, we don't really have a vision of what is the next chapter of Jewish history. We don't have a direction in which we're going collectively as a people. We're just maintaining status quo. So we don't have a way of moving forward. We're not fulfilling our purpose. And in terms of assimilation, I mean, within the United States, you have between 60 to 80% assimilation rates. So clearly the formula that we are using, we've plugged in the wrong variables to get the outcome that we would like. So if we want a different outcome, then we need to start plugging in the different variables needed.
Andrea Bollander.
It's so hard to be speaking right after Rudy. I've been a Holocaust educator for over 20 years, and we still have 30 states that have no mandate to teach the Holocaust. And while New York State did pass a Holocaust law, it was a survey. And the survey found that 99.8% of schools were acceptable in their Holocaust teaching. The question begs, why does New York State have the highest level of Holocaust illiteracy? Why? Long Island is the 4th largest Jewish community in this country, behind New York, LA, and of course South Florida. Why do we have such a high level of Holocaust illiteracy? And that is something we have to talk to our school systems about. We've put that question to our regent. We're just not doing it right. We're teaching to the test, we're not giving it enough time, and I know it's not going to be a popular thing, but really what I would like to do is to have a countrywide scoring system and let each senator know if they rate an A to an F. Right now, the only state in this entire country that maybe has an A- is New Jersey. I know, don't get upset. New Jersey has a standard and a minimum and a Holocaust commission. We do not. So let's make sure that 80 years later, we have hardly any survivors left that are witnesses, but we have people like myself and my brother, and how many people here in this audience are 2Gs? How many children of survivors are in this audience? How many are third generations? We have to continue telling the story, and we have to force our education systems to really, really look deep down and to say, we're not doing a good enough job. Because most kids, and I'm sure Rudy will agree, at Columbia, at most of our Ivy League schools, they can't name one concentration camp. They don't know when Hitler served. This is a very, very scary statistic. So there's got to be an answer. The answer is education, but the answer is also not political. I remember my father saying that when Moses handed down the 10 Commandments, please tell me which one said pick a party. Pick a human. Pick someone you can stand behind who is going to do the right thing. So do the right thing. Every party, every human, every school district, 30 states still with no mandate 80 years later. What does that tell us?
Commissioner Ryder.
So it's a fact that anti-Semitism is on the rise in this country. I am happy to say in Nassau County it's not, but I also believe there's a lot that is unreported. I believe in this country, hate is on the rise. Hate coming out of the COVID virus when many people got radicalized on their social media, on their computers, when these kids were left alone in their rooms on these devices, learning more and more about hate and how to hate others. The rabbi said it before. He said the only way is to stay united. We take a pledge, right? We pledge allegiance to this country. One nation, under God, indivisible. The only way we will lose if we allow hate to divide us. We should never allow that enter into our world, and if we continue to fight it and we stay united, we will overcome the anti-Semitism and the hate that's in this country.
Legislator Pilip.
Thank you. I definitely agree with the Commissioner. I think social media has become a big problem. It's spreading anti-Semitism idea. It's become socially acceptable to just to say whatever they want. I mean, influencer like Kanye West and others feeling very comfortable to put anti-Semitism in their speech, in their language. And I don't think we're doing enough for that. That's a big problem. If we are okay with that, that gives the license for others also to just to come up with another anti-Semitic idea. And as I said before, if we don't gonna stop it when this is just starting as a talk, later on it's gonna be too late. So social media has a lot to do with anti-Semitism, the fact that it's on the rise.
Avi Poznick.
I think by the fact that this is a full room here tonight shows that we know that anti-Semitism is on the rise. We just saw a statistic that came out, I think just the other day, that there is according to the FBI, there was an 150% more anti-Semitic crimes than was last reported. 150% more. One of the things that we have to see happen is, as a united community, call out anti-Semitism when we see it. I remember there was an incident just last year at a town meeting. I'm not going to say which one it was, but it was in Nassau County. And you had a woman who got up and essentially said that because of one menorah that was in the town that was erected, that all of a sudden the Jews are taking over. Every single elected official in this state, from the governor's office all the way on down to the county executive, our senators, our members in the assembly, the legislature, all called it out for what it was. That is something that has to happen every single time. Our leaders need to set the example that it is not okay, no matter how big or how small. And I think the other part, which was said before, is the importance of reaching our youth. Making sure that they understand. It's not okay to joke about it. It's not okay to draw a swastika. It wouldn't be okay to make a joke or to do something that would offend any other community. It is not okay to do something that will offend the Jewish community either.
So we've touched on social media, and one of the themes of this evening is what can we do? Not just talking about it, but what can we do? As we know, social media, Commissioner, has become the oxygen for anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. And at a recent task force hearing on anti-Semitism, one of your very talented officers talked about how Nassau County Police and law enforcement are getting very good at identifying it on social media. Now, without giving up your methods, can you share your thoughts with us on how you are dealing with this and grappling with it? And can you start to educate the audience on that very important phrase of what can the people in this room do, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, an older brother or sister, an aunt or uncle, or somebody who cares?
So first of all, how do we prevent it? We stay engaged. We are totally engaged. We have the best trained officers in the country. We have individuals that just do social media all day long. They get on it with undercover accounts, and they do exactly what the neo-Nazi white supremacist group is doing. They stoke the public. They try to get something out of them to find out who's the angry ones. And we monitor those sites. Some people don't think that's appropriate that we monitor the sites. I don't care. We monitor the sites. But if you ask me how we prevent it, how many of you pay for your child's phone? I do. They're 24, by the way, and I still pay for it. I track my kids. I know where they go. I don't know what they're doing, and I tell them that all the time, but I'm tracking them for their safety. My wife is on all of their accounts. She gets those photos. She gets those comments, and we tell them all the time as we speak at all of our schools here in Nassau County. Once the bullet leaves the gun, you can't take it back. Once you hit that finger, go. You can't take it back. And I don't care if it's someone says, oh, it only stays up for a minute. Not if I screenshot it, and then I put your daughter's head on top of that body, and then I send it out again. There are very disturbed people in this world that want that. Knowing the groups they associate with, the old saying, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Knowing the kids they hang out with, getting into their business, giving them their freedoms, yes, but understanding who they associate with and what they're doing is probably the first step that's going to prevent that and stop some of this violence.
Thank you. So we heard the law enforcement side of that equation. I'd like to talk to a person who is on Instagram, who persuades people every single day and educates. Tell us what you think the people here, youngsters, etc., what we can do to stem this tide that's coming at us of anti-Semitism.
I think when it comes to the expression on social media, I think it's really an expression of how society thinks. You know, a lot of us were raised in our Jewish community in circles and in places where we think the same, where we don't really associate with people who hate Israel and the Jewish people. And then all of a sudden we see all these posts coming up during wars and conflicts with Israel, and we're all surprised. Oh my God, where did all these people come out from? Well, the reality is that they were always there, and we were ignoring the problem, and the problem is getting worse. And I think what social media does for us is it gives us a window into how society actually thinks and how many people are actually very problematic. And again, if we want to change things, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be gradual, but it's a bottom-up approach. Like I said earlier, if we look at any minority rights that earned their rights within society, it's not overnight, and it's not by making excuses, and it's not just by signing petitions and going to the government. It's by standing up and shifting pop culture from the bottom up. And so you have a free space called social media where you can post and say what you want. And so in those places, we have to post better content, better ideas. You know, if someone has the option between two ideas, they're going to choose the one that sounds the best. But if they only have the ones that sound the worst, of course, they're going to choose the only one that they have. So when it comes to the story of Israel and the Jewish people, why is it that the society that we live in are constantly hearing about our story from those who are against us? You don't want to hear about black rights from a KKK member. You don't want to hear about women rights from misogynists. So are the only people talking about the Jewish people in Israel are those that are anti-Israel and anti-the Jewish people? We have to start narrating our story and doing it in a very productive way. One of the ways that I'm working on, besides the videos on social media that get a lot of views and change people's minds, is we're doing a documentary series, and it's called We Were Never Lost. I see there's tribes of Israel on the walls here. You know, this is imagery that we have in a lot of our synagogues, and we know that Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, come from 2.5 tribes. Shevet Yehuda, Benjamin, and a part of Levi, which I'm from Levi from both sides of my family. But what about the other 9.5 tribes? And so we're doing a documentary series on these communities, but it's not only going to tell the stories of the disconnected/unknown communities of Jews. It also shifts the way the world understands the Jewish people in the first place. Because through their experience, we're able to understand how anti-Semitism works, why they're so connected with Israel, why they marry within themselves, why they do Brit Milah, why they keep kosher, why they do all the things that make Judaism beautiful, and the way of life that we've preserved for thousands of years beautiful. And through their story, they're able to understand us as a whole collective. And so this is one of the things that I'm doing. But everyone has their own role. Everyone has their own function. A lot of people ask me, what can I do? Well, I don't know who you are or what you're capable of doing, so I cannot really tell you. But what I can tell you is what I ask myself in order to find out what I could do. And what I ask myself every day when I put tefillin is, what are the problems that I see in this world? And we all see different problems, even between husband and wife or kids or friends. Even those relationships see different problems in sometimes the same situation. Some people see problems with the environment, they need to go help with pollution. Some people see problems within marriages, they need to be psychologists. Some people see problems within the body, they need to be doctors. Some people see problems within technology, they want to invent things to change society. What are the problems that you see? Ask yourself this. What are the ways and the tools that you have, the skills that you have in order to fix those problems? And what are the tools and the skills that you can gain in order to help you continue to fix those problems? That is the question I think each one of us as individuals have to ask ourselves. And once you apply that, I think we will all be living a more fulfilled life and we'll be united and actually moving forward towards our future.
We have a question from the audience from, I believe it's Ramin, and I think this is a question, Avi, I think you'd be very well suited to answer. It said, the first week in college, a group of Palestinians made claims mostly anti-Semitic. I now know that as a 16-year-old in 1979, I knew it was wrong, but I did not know how to defend my people. With our kids experiencing even worse within college campuses, what should we say to them? What do you say to them to get them more involved and defend themselves?
So I think the way we see anti-Semitism manifest itself, especially on college campuses and within the education system across the country, is we're seeing it in two forms. You have what I would call the classical anti-Semitism. You'll see swastikas, you'll see Jewish symbols, the mezuzah, that is targeted, that could be vandalized, which you see on many college campuses. But we also see, and we've been seeing this now for a number of years, and almost for as long as I've been now at Stand With Us, is the misconception that anti-Zionism is just merely a political position and that anti-Zionist speech and conduct should be 100% protected. We see professors who are in positions of power, who are tenured, who will potentially do grade retribution towards Jewish and Israeli students who stand up, who feel that anything they say and anything they do is totally protected. And this is simply not the case. It does not always fall under academic freedom, and this is the reason why at GW a number of weeks ago we launched a Title VI investigation against GW, and it's something we did at other universities across the country. These are things that we need to be holding our universities and academia to account, and there are tools to do that. I think the preparation for our students has to start before they go to campus. It has to start at a younger age in high schools. They have to understand the story of the Jewish people. They have to understand our history. They have to understand that the Jewish story, returning to our indigenous land in the land of Israel, is the greatest social justice story in the history of the world. They have to understand the facts. They have to understand the language that the other side is using and be able, as Rudy said, to talk to them, to have those conversations, to spread the truth. This is something that we're doing now in our Jewish day schools, our public high schools, providing them with materials, providing them with strategies, providing them with guidance, providing them with the empowerment and support they need to educate their peers and to stand tall.
So that kind of swings us round to the actual word anti-Semitism. And it's interesting because if you look up the word anti-Semitism in the Oxford Dictionary, it says anti-Semitism is hostility to or prejudice against the Jewish people. So the question I'd like to pose to some of our panel is, has that definition of anti-Semitism and the modern moniker of Jew hatred or Jew hatred, has it changed? Is what we believe to be anti-Semitism that was defined by the Oxford Dictionary what we're really dealing with now? Is it more menacing? Is it more pervasive? I'd like to ask Andrea to start on that.
You're always starting with me. I think since the birth of the State of Israel, that's really given them more of a reason to equate Jews with Israel. So that's why we have this IRA definition of what is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism isn't just the hatred of Jew. Now it's morphed into the hatred of Israel and Israel as a state. What do we do about this? You know, we have the IRA definition and we have all of these things that we're teaching people, but I think we really need to act on it. And I think, as Rudy had said, Jews come from Judea. We are a native people. Israel is not something that was plopped in this, in this world in 1948. We're 3,700 years of history. And I think the equating of Israel and the politics of Israel that people disagree with, they're equating that with Jew hatred. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be right now.
Thank you, Andrea. Rudy?
So when it comes to anti-Semitism, the way it's functioned throughout history, like I said earlier, is it's finding the source of suffering and struggle of a community or society or an extreme group and finding a way to attach that to the Jewish people / Israel. Our people have had different names throughout history: Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel; Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel; Ivrim, Hebrews; Jews, Judeans. But we're talking about the same people. And imagine that you are going into the mind of someone who is actually against the Jewish people. What is the one thing that they would want to take away from us right now that gives us power? Of course it would be Israel. So of course any form of being against the right for the Jewish people to live on their ancestral homeland is a form of being anti-Jewish. The same way if you were against the right for black people to have equal rights, that's a form of being anti the black people. If you're against Native American rights to their civilization or to their society, that would be a form of being against the Native Americans. If you're against any minority or group's rights to achieve their aspirations, that's a form of being anti that group of people. Now, when it comes to Israel, a lot of people try to confuse that being critical of Israel is not anti-Semitic. Well, to be honest, I live in Israel, and I don't know one Israeli that doesn't complain or criticize the Israeli government. So criticizing the Israeli government is not the problem here. It's the 3Ds that we've all known, that we're raised with. It's, if you hold a double standard to the Jewish people, you delegitimize Israel, okay? And these are the things that we need to understand, that if you are against the right for Israel to exist, this is when it becomes anti-Semitic. If you're against a policy or a politician or someone saying something, that's not a problem, but at least come and offer a solution. Now, the deeper answer as to this definition of why is there anti-Semitism, not just what is happening, but why is this happening? Anti-Semitism functions as something within the algorithm of the universe that we work with. It is a rejection of the Jewish people assimilating. Like I said, anti-Semitism only rises throughout history whenever the Jews are assimilating, forgetting their purpose, and going away from who they are. So we have the remedy. We have the solution. We just need to apply it. If there was something that was uniting our people to know who we are, to reconnect back to our roots and to our values, and to actually achieve our aspirations, I can guarantee you that anti-Semitism would go away. So anti-Semitism is not only the rejection to anything related to the Jewish people, it's the rejection to the Jewish people failing their purpose.
Thank you, Rudy. Changing gears a little bit, the New York Times reported on a survey this past week in which it found that supremacist groups have perpetuated a 5-year high of anti-Semitic attacks. Specifically, 6,750 incidents, which equal out to a 40% increase. So I'd like to ask Legislator Mazi Phillip, what can people in this room do to help our police? How do we partner with them? What is it that the people, with our theme of what can we do? What can we do?
Thank you. So it's very important. When you see something, you have to say something, okay? As I said before, just call 911, call the police department, tell them what you see, okay? Let the police officer to investigate the case. It shouldn't be your call. Your call is to call and to report what are you seeing. A few months ago, one of the rabbis here in Great Neck called me because he saw a weird car coming around the synagogue. He felt uncomfortable, so he took a picture of the plate license and he sent it to me immediately. He said, Mazi, I see this car driving around. As soon as I got this message, I called the commissioner. I sent the plate, and he immediately did the investigation, and he told us everything's clear, everything's good. So I report back to the rabbi, don't worry, everything's okay. Thanks God, that was nothing, but that can be to something dangerous. So if you say something, if you see something, say something. It's very important to make that call and follow up with the investigation. Don't leave it alone. It's very important.
Commissioner Ryder, on that same vein, one of your officers in a hearing with the Anti-Semitism Task Force said one of the most frustrating things for you as a police department is you'll get the call, somebody will say something, but in order to drill down, nobody wants to talk. And at the same time, that follow through by the individual. Could you, again, on the theme of what can we do, can you explain to our viewers and our audience, how do you do these investigations? And what do you need in order for you guys to do your job?
So that saying that came out of 9/11, if you see something, say something, is so powerful. It truly is. And many of our communities today don't report. They underreport. We know that. Avi and I have had this conversation numerous times about how we have to have more reporting. When you call 911, a cop comes, he takes the report. And then if it's something of a SWAT sticker, for argument's sake, we would send a detective, our crime scene. All of that gets reported to our hate crime individual, which is the deputy commanding officer of every precinct. They then make sure the investigation is followed through and the reporting is done up through the chief of detective's office. Our responsibility lays as high as the chief of department. The highest ranking member of our department, the 4-star general, if you will, all of our hate crime must be reported to him. And he is responsible to make sure investigations are followed through and reporting is done properly. But one thing I can't change, no matter how good we are, is that you, the community, stop reporting. I need you to report. I don't need you to call Mazi, because Mazi's going to call me. Trust me, she does. But I need you to call 911. Let my cops start the process that will move towards stopping that person making the threat and hopefully making it a safer environment. So please, if you see something, say something. Thank you.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
About 6 months ago, I saw someone from Franklin Square that was posting Nazi memorabilia for sale. And I called the auction house, and they're giving me back and forth. And what I did is I texted Bruce Blakeman. And Bruce Blakeman, he got in touch with Patty. And again, I didn't stop until I saw it taken down. And I called the auction house, and I said that we would start legal action. But we have to follow through. That I didn't stop until I kept going on that site, and I saw, and I said, will this person be allowed to post anything else? And they said they've been banned. Okay, can they reinstate under another name? Yes, but at least they know that people are watching. So we have to follow through. It's not just someone else is going to do the work. We each have to do the work. We all see things, and many of us just let it go by and make it someone else's job. It's all of our jobs. Every single person in this room and everyone at home. Don't think someone else is going to handle it. Patty's guys do an amazing job, and by Monday, that whole site was down. And I felt even a small personal part in getting that done. So thanks, Patty.
So just to close out that whole thing with, if you see something, say something. Could you talk a little bit about, Commissioner, how a lot of these groups, some of the things that they do, are almost like recruitment tools? And could you talk a little bit about that, because that is one of the things that I think our audience may not understand, that I think is a critical element in some of the activities of people who are perpetrating anti-Semitic attacks.
If you see something, say something. Tell the experts. Let us investigate it. Don't engage. I just spoke on Steamboat Road 3 times, 4 times in the last 2 weeks. And every time I go in there, I beg of, I even spoke to the young kids, don't engage, because it is a recruitment tool. They're trying to get others to engage. And when you come in, Next thing, I got 2 friends on the other side that want to jump in. Those people are driven by hate, have an agenda. That agenda is to cause harm. They won't be the first one to throw the punch, but guarantee me that you throw one, they're throwing 5 back. So call 911, let us take over. We get paid to do that. We will investigate it, and don't let them get the better of you. That's so important, that message you get to your kids, because we had it down in 5 towns a couple weeks back where they encountered some kids knocking on doors, looking for 10 kids to go to pray. And as they were building up their group to go pray, some two individuals passed in the car, confronted, got out. One pushed the kid to the ground, knocked him on the ground, got in the car, and took off. It was the Sabbath. They did not call 911. They couldn't use the phone. And as the rabbi explained, in an emergency, of course, you can call 911. And we should have gotten it that night. It took a while, but we did end finding out who they were, and that was taken care of. See something, say something, call us, don't engage.
So I'd like to also bring up an incident that took place 2 weeks ago, because it actually dovetails on a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight. There was an event that many of you probably have seen just recently. It was called Savior's Day. It was a paid event where thousands of people attended. And these are direct quotes from the Anti-Defamation League and also from video that you can watch. Let me quote what this speaker said. Jewish power is what has all of our power, with talent and wisdom afraid. But let's take a look at what these people control. At every door that leads to power, they have a sentinel on watch. Somebody has to take on the synagogue of Satan. And here we are. What good is your vote if the man you voted for has to vote with someone you never elected that is behind the door to get instructions? And the Jews have become wealthy just by loaning money, charging you interest. And the stranglehold the Jews have on this government, the synagogue of Satan, has destroyed this country. Those are actual quotes from a speech that was given. The man that said those things was a man by the name of Louis Farrakhan. So the question to the panel is, with this kind of Jew hatred being spewed in speeches, with our theme of what can we do, how does a community stand up and push back and fight it? And at the same time, if you'd like to put an aside there why the media doesn't cover it or it's skewed coverage, feel free to add that as well. I'd like to start with somebody who's very direct on these kinds of subjects. I'd like to start with Rudy.
So again, you have these individuals from all extreme groups, from the far right to the far left, to the black supremacist Farrakhans, white supremacist neo-Nazis, who come to the same conclusion, that the Jew is the source of the problem that they see. So we need to understand that historically this is how anti-Semitism works, and there's a reason for why they see us as the source of the problem, is because subconsciously they recognize deep down inside of them that we're supposed to be the solution to the problems that they experience. And if we want to have our rights, we need to earn those rights. Today, if you go to a college campus or an intellectual space, try saying something racist, try saying something sexist. That wasn't the case 67 years ago. You can go and say something and get away with it. Why is it different today? Because society has shifted. There's freedom of speech, but there's a freedom of reaction to that speech as well. There's society's freedom to react to the speech that is wrong. And I can guarantee you, even if you have individuals at different universities that may be inside of them racist or inside of them sexist, they will think twice before speaking up, because they know it comes with a consequence. And the Jewish people have not fought for society for them to recognize that there should be a consequence also for us. And so we need to shift pop culture. We need to get the people to understand that the Jewish people are an amazing group of human beings that should also be respected like anyone else. And we need to create consequences, whether that it comes from the top up, from the bottom down, wherever that comes from, we need to create those consequences.
Avi?
We live in a country where we protect, value, and cherish the right of free speech. People can say things, people can express their views, but we have not just the right, the obligation to express our views and to condemn bad speech. Whether it's someone like Louis Farrakhan, whether it's someone like a neo-Nazi, as I said before, in loud unison, this has to be condemned. It has to be made clear that it's not okay. There's a booklet outside, if any are still left, and I'm happy to provide any with more, called Anti-Semitism Then and Now, something that Stand With Us produced. And you'll show examples. Can I borrow the copy just for a second? Sorry. Just hold it up. Anti-Semitism Then and Now. And I'm happy to pass it around, where you'll see examples. Things that were happening in the 1930s and 40s in Europe, things that were happening and being said in the Middle East, and similarities of what's happening now on college campuses by the far left and the far right. And I think what was said before about the role that social media plays, and we saw this especially during the pandemic. We've seen things that were taking place online, but unfortunately we're now seeing those things translate into the real world and happening now into the real world. And what the commissioner said before, and what Mazi said before, that if you see something, say something, whether it's in person or online, let the police know and make sure that our leaders and our young people are condemning and speaking up about what they see.
So at this time, I'd like to also remind everybody, Alona Trokel is up front here. If anybody would like to ask a question of the panel, please raise your hand. She'll come and she'll give you a card. You can write down a question. And while she's doing that, we do have a question I'd like to pose to our police commissioner. We do have the case that we talked about once before of Joey Borgen, a young man who was going to a rally, who was beaten within an inch of his life, who right now, as we sit here, is going through a court process. Are there things that can be done on a state level that from a police aspect, law enforcement aspect, that can help you guys, that people here under the condition of what can we do to help our police, to help victims such as Joey Borgen?
So the laws in our state have changed. You all know about cashless bail and all the reforms that have taken place, discovery, raise the age. All of that has removed the element of a punishment to those that commit those crimes, such as hate crime, freedom of speech, Avi just spoke about. We cherish our First Amendment right, but some groups know enough to push it to a limit. That neo-Nazi white supremacist group that pushed the pamphlets out in Oceanside did it exactly for that reason. They chose a Jewish community. They knew if they threw the pamphlets on the front lawn, it would get the attention, and it was photos of religious leaders throughout the world with bullet holes on their head. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to say anything. But the fear was already in the community. We answered back, and we said, if you continue these acts, we will arrest you. And then I got threats made to me and to my family saying that obviously the commissioner doesn't understand the First Amendment right. And I said, I purely understand the First Amendment right. But what you are doing is called littering. And if I gotta lock you up for something, I'll lock you up for littering. Again, we do cherish that First Amendment right, but we need to change the lawmakers who make the laws who allow this to go on without addressing it.
So let's, we do have a couple of quick questions. What do you suggest, the panel, how we encourage prominent Jews such as Senator Schumer, Jamie Dimon, Barbara Streisand, to speak out and condemn anti-Semitism, not just generic hate? Andrea, would you like to start with that?
Giving me an impossible task, given the three people you just mentioned. I would say the only way to really reach those type of people would be through social media, because we're tagging them on any of these causes. That's what they respond to. But I have to be honest, we still can teach, and I'm going to give a plug here to Stand With Us, because I know that at the end of March they're going to have a 6-hour professional development for teachers. Any teachers here in the audience that can get 6 hours on professional development on how to teach the Holocaust? So we still have to educate, but until the Silicon Six gets some handcuffs on them, the only way is to go out on social media and really try to address it. Addressing it, by putting, things on people's windshields. It's a local thing.
Rudy?
So I want to share a story that I think is better than answering that question. So when I was a student at Columbia University, my first semester, I was taking a class called University Studies. And it's a class that's required for every new student or transfer student to take. And you don't get a grade, you get pass-fail based on attendance, and you have to come twice a week for 2 hours each, so a total of 4 hours. And you're sitting down in this classroom, and the teacher is telling you how to use the library, how to talk to your advisor, how to email your professor, and all the things that you need to be a student. And for me, I was already after the Army, after a year in Asia, and to be honest, I didn't need to be taught how to use a library. So right away, I'm realizing that this is a huge waste of time for me. It's great that there's this resource for the students that need it, but as Israelis, the line for us starts in the beginning, not at the end. So I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this? I don't want to spend my time in this classroom. And during the second or third class, I realized that the way we would all sign in is we would sign in our names and we'd pass the sheet over. There'd be a list of names, you'd find your name, you'd sign it over, and you pass it. And one day I get the guy next to me passing over the sheet, and I noticed that he signed over a very Jewish name. I'm going to use a different name than his, David Cohen. So I see David Cohen, I pass over the sheet, and I realize that this guy's Jewish next to me, and it's like, hey, David, are you Jewish? And he says, yeah, so? And I said, no, don't worry, David, I'm Jewish too. Akol beseder, I'm a brother. Listen, David, I have a deal for you, okay? One day you're going to sign me in, and the next class I'm going to sign you in, and we're going to cut 50% of these classes. And eventually we found someone to sign us in, and we never came to that class again. And from there we became friends. And one day he invites me over to his house, and we're smoking some hookah and drinking some beers. And he says, Rudy, why did you come to Columbia University? And I said, listen, I came here because it's listed as the #1 most anti-Semitic university. I'm tired of all these different students giving excuses on their campus. If I could come and create a change here, there's no excuses elsewhere. He says, look, Rudy, I like you as a person, but I have to be honest with you that I'm not a fan of Israel, the apartheid, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, all the trigger words starts pouring out. And I asked him, okay, well, before we get into all those things that you just poured out on me, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where are your parents, grandparents? And he says, I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I'm like, okay, that explains a lot already. He said, but before that, your parents and grandparents, he's like, they were in the Soviet Union, they were in Russia and Georgia and Ukraine. He's like, okay, and before that? He says, what do you mean? I was like, well, before we were in Russia and Georgia and the Soviet Union. He's like, what do you mean? We always were from there. I was like, but you're Jewish. He's like, yeah, well, we probably converted to Judaism. I was like, you mean to tell me that in the Soviet Union, when it was illegal to be Jewish, where you would be killed for practicing Judaism, that you had hundreds of thousands of people converting to Judaism? Let alone if you trace the DNA of Ashkenazi Jews, it's clearly Jewish DNA. Let alone if you trace the linguistic history of Yiddish, which is a mix, it's a Creole of Hebrew and German. But the Yiddish being spoken in the Soviet Union is Hebrew, German, and Russian words. You can actually trace how a population started to migrate with added on words. And I'm throwing him all these different things, and he's realizing, wow, there's something to it. And at first he's like, I don't want to listen to what you have to say. Maybe give me some articles, give me some sources, give me some books, and I'll look more into it. And I'm like, okay. Next time that we're supposed to have this class that we're skipping, let's sit down, you read what you need to read, and we'll continue the conversation. And we sit down, and everything that he had researched proved what I was telling to him. He's like, I want to come to some of your events, but don't put me in any of the pictures, don't post me online. I don't want all of my anti-Israel friends to know that I'm part of these events. Started coming to 1 event, to 2 events, to 3 events, eventually became an ambassador of our group, eventually became a board member of our group, and after a year at Columbia University as a member of our group said to me, he's like, listen, Rudy, I have to take a break from Columbia. I have to leave for a few years. There's something I need to do, and maybe I'll come back. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're so important as our group. We need you here. Where are you going to go? He says, I have to go join the army in Israel. And the point of this story is not to show how you can convince someone to join the IDF, because that has to come from themselves. But it's to show that even an individual that was so anti-Israel, Jewish themselves. It wasn't by dealing with the symptom. It wasn't by screaming back at him. I asked them questions to find where the source of the problem was. And so whatever you're trying to convince someone, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, whether they care or they don't care, whether they're anti-Israel or they're not, try to find out where the source of that problem is in order to find the solution.
Thank you, Rudy. Avi?
Just want to comment on something that was said just before, and it goes back to something that, what can we do as well? Was mentioned before about the changes that exist with some of the laws, the criminal justice system, and one of the things that Stand With Us started a number of years ago was a legal department in order to help students and communities know your rights, whether it comes to free speech issues, issues on campuses, issues in the communities. What can you do? What support is out there? One of the areas within this department is we have a pro bono attorney who, if you are the victim of an anti-Semitic crime, because of some of the issues that we see within the criminal justice system, we will file and launch a civil suit against the perpetrators. So not only that, but with these suits, if the perpetrator is, let's say, some 16-year-old kid living with his or her parents, the parents are on the hook because they're the financial, they're providing the finances for the person. Many people will think twice. Do I really want to go and draw a swastika? Do I really want to go for 5 seconds and attack a Jew on the street? When our lawyers are getting involved, the people are listening. The authorities are listening. We had a case, just very quickly, and I'll turn it back over. This happened in New York City, where it turned out to be a minor who was kept on banging on the door of a Jewish apartment, vandalizing the mezuzah. And once we were able to get all the information, the NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force got involved. They investigated. An arrest was made. And one of the things that the police officer said is that when they found out and spoke to the parents of where this kid lives, the punishment that he's going to get at home is much worse than what's going to happen with the police. But this is something that is another tool in our pockets that we should be using as well.
Okay, so we've got quite a few questions. We're going to try to get a few of them in because we're coming to a close very soon of the program. So I'm going to just ask the questions to very specific people. The first one is to Commissioner Ryder. It says, we've all been following the Joey Borgen case, and do you believe that our attendance at the hearing of the attackers could impact the DA's behavior and the court's treatment of the case? And do you believe that cashless bail was a part of this situation in which he was attacked in the comments at the conclusion of the person who was let go?
So I don't believe a DA, a judge, or a jury is influenced by the audience. Sometimes individuals are. They're supposed to be impartial. They're supposed to be fair, and we hope that they are. In this case, obviously, justice was not done. And was cashless bail part of it? No. Cashless bail is to return to court. And they came to court and they went to trial. But if you don't show, that does have an effect on your communities and does have an effect on people watching, because they want to know that there is pain that goes a lot further than the victim. It goes right through a community. And I don't think anybody understands that more than the Jewish community. When you hurt one of a Jewish individual, you hurt a whole community, because you're doing it because they're Jewish, not because they are a kid on the street corner.
Thank you, Commissioner. This question is to Rudy. This is very intriguing. Last year, I had the pleasure of living in Israel for 1 year because I was in a gap year program. While I was in Israel, I felt so motivated to be involved in the Zionist movement. Now that I am back, I have felt less motivated. Also, it's been too hard to get involved. How does someone get involved, and how do you get that spark back?
Move back to Israel. So, like I said earlier, there are different ways in which people can be impactful. Different people have different skills. You know, public speaking is actually something I've had to develop. It's not something that I was born with. So sometimes even the skills that you're given, you can still add on more skills. And for whatever situation you are, if you're a student, if you're in your community, if you're a parent, if you're a child, whatever stage of your life you are, you have to figure out what are the problems in front of you that you see, and try to find solutions for those problems. Whether they're on the micro level or macro level, it's not just one, it's several, and those problems change also with time as your situation changes. So figure out what are the skills that you were given. Some of us were born with certain skills. What are the skills that you can still obtain and use that in order to correct the problems that you see? So to this person, if he's a student, I don't know if he's a student, but I'm assuming because they were on gap year, you know, if you're in a university, okay, figure out what are the problems in your space with your students, with your peers, with your surroundings, and figure out how to be effective to change the problems that you see. It's not up to me to tell you how you can act because we're all different individuals. It's up to you to tap into your potential, but in order to tap into the potential, you have to figure out what are the skills that you have, what are the problems that you see, and use those skills in order to solve those problems.
I think it's a very important question. So I grew up in Israel. As you know, I serve in the Israeli army. I'm proud American, Israeli, Ethiopian Jew, okay? So I think for the question, the last question the student just asked, the fact that you were in Israel and you learn a lot and you want to be involved and you are here now is very important because now you saw the true Israel. A lot of people don't know what Israel is about. They're calling Israel apartheid country. You know, I grew up in Israel. I mean, I'm a proud Ethiopian Jew, and I can tell you, Israel is one of the most amazing country, okay, that gave me so much to me personally, to many Ethiopian Jew in Israel, opportunity to better education. Today we have lawyers, doctors, nurses, proud soldiers. They are Ethiopian. So for somebody to tell me Israel is apartheid country, I'm sorry, you don't know what's through Israel. So you came, you learn a lot. That truth you're gonna talk about. So now you become ambassador. And your work here just started. So I hope I'm gonna motivate you. I think the knowledge you got from Israel, the truth, the discovery about Israel will help you to be a good ambassador here. Thank you.
Question, Avi. So many organizations are working to create a safer tomorrow. And how do we get a multitude of organizations to work together to make a stronger impact in pressuring our elected leaders on all sides to speak up against anti-Semitism? This person then finally says, in their opinion, many politicians lump anti-Semitism into general hate, but we need to get very vocal and call it what it is at that time if it is anti-Semitism.
So I think the last point is something that cannot be articulated enough, in that, yes, all hate is bad. No one here in this room, and most good people around the world, no one is going to say that you know, some hate is good. But at times, we have to singularly condemn certain kinds of hate. We cannot be afraid to singularly condemn and focus on anti-Semitism. When that is the topic of the day, when that is the incident that we're talking about, we don't always have to say, I condemn anti-Semitism and all hate. We can say, I condemn anti-Semitism, just like if I'm talking about anti-Asian hate, I'm going to say, I condemn anti-Asian hate. If I'm talking about hate against the black community, I'm going to say, I condemn black racism. It doesn't have to be all included. We have to be able to singularly condemn what we're talking about. I think the community, our community, again, needs to stand together. There has to be more communication. There has to be more coordination. We see this from the other side. We see the continuous coordination of messaging. We see the continuous, not caring who gets the credit. The one singular message that they continue to repeat all the time, no matter what the issue is. And this is something that our community, we have to have more unity. We have to have more coordination in what we're talking about, what we're saying. And as we're holding our elected officials accountable, to stand up and condemn what we're seeing.
And because we're running against time, our last question, and we have somebody to close out our program. This question is right up your alley, Rudy. It says our public school students are going to very anti-Semitic universities. In the 1980s, there were no longer the same issue that it was in Israel. What are we doing to ensure the students of today are prepared to face anti-Semites and have the proper answers? What should we be doing as parents and as family members to prepare those students as they go off to colleges and universities?
this really comes to education, and education doesn't start once the students start universities. It doesn't start once there's a conflict in Israel and then everything is happening on social media. It doesn't start when the prom is too late. It starts from the beginning. So if you are a parent of your child, you have to make sure that that child is raised. No, they know how to stand up, they know how to walk, they know how to talk, but they also need to be able to be a Jew in practice in the world that we live in today, and the world that we've lived in for generations. And I think there's usual ways in which Jews respond to the traumas that we face. And I think I find the parallel from an example in psychology that was taught in one of the classes I took, where they talk about an abusive woman in a relationship with a husband. And there's usually three ways in which a woman responds. Way number one is she stands up, fights back, gets justice for the situation, makes sure that this person doesn't do it again to her, to anyone else. Way number two is making excuses. It was just one time, he didn't really mean it. Oh, he was just drunk, he was just upset. And way number three is to blame themselves. Say, no, it was my fault, I should have just done this, I should have just done that. And when you look at the trauma that Jewish people face, anti-Semitism, we respond the same way. Very few of us stand up and fight back. Most Jews make excuses. Oh, it's really from the right. Oh, it's really from the left. Oh, it's against Israel. I'm a Jew. I'm disconnected. It's over there. It's in another country. Oh, it's out of my place. It's not in my community. And you even have some Jews who use the third route and side with their oppressors, whether it's from Netorah Kauta to the Jews on the far left that stand against Israel. And there's a reality of trauma that we have, and we have to be able to process that trauma. We have to be given the tools in order to how to adapt to the situations that we have. So if you're a parent, speak up to your communities and to those who control education, because if we don't teach our next generation to be stronger, we're bound to repeat the same thing that we've been through the past.
And that concludes our panel discussion this evening. I would like to thank Avi Poznick for staying with us. The greatest police commissioner in Nassau County history, Patrick Ryder. An inspiring figure and just, somebody that we all can look up to, and we thank very, very much for not only your presence, but your wisdom and sharing your time with us, Rudy Rochman. The actual, one of the authors of the Combating Anti-Semitism Task Force, our county legislator, Mazi Phillip. And if there's a person that you would like to meet on the way out, it's this lady here because of the different hats that she has worn in many arenas, March of the Living, as well as the Holocaust Memorial Tolerance Center, and all the different things that she does. Andrea Bollander. And I would like to ask to come forward of a very special person in the Great Neck community, Rabbi Asher Kravitsky, who will give us a few remarks for a few moments as we conclude tonight's panel discussion. Rabbi Asher.
Just to piggyback on what was already said. As we're coming now from Purim, the Talmud recounts a monumental moment in our people's lives. When one of the greatest anti-Semites, the greatest Jew hater of his time, Haman, who declared the Jewish question and the final solution in one day Holocaust. Mordechai entreated Esther to approach her husband, and after some deliberation, she agreed. She asked everyone to daven on her behalf and to fast on her behalf. And she walked into the palace, ready to take charge, to overturn the decree, the fate of our people on her shoulders. She marched in with all the spiritual bravado. But as soon as she walked in, the Talmud relates, she saw a big statue, and for whatever reason, all the spiritual bravado, all the spiritual intent, all melted away. And she screamed out what we have today in chapter 22 in Tehillim, one of those powerful verses. Keli, lama zaftani. My God, why have you forsaken me? One of our great rabbis, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, in his commentary to the Tehillim says, there's two ways of reading this plea. One way is, lama zaftani, God, why? Why us? Why are we victims? Al tika lama elamash, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says. Don't say, she says, why, but what for? We don't ask why. The agenda is not to ask why. The theme of tonight is, what can we do? We have to remain vigilant. We must be aware. But anti-Semitism doesn't start outside. How could we expect the world to love us when in our own families we don't speak to each other? When we don't embrace each other? When we have communal conflicts? We expect the world to love us. But what about us loving us? What about us smiling toward each other and helping each other and going out of our way for each other? The Lubavitcher Rebbe taught that a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. When we walk into a room and it's dark, we don't start swinging a bat. We don't combat the darkness. We simply turn on the light. Light. And what is this light? It's very simple. The Rebbe says the power of one. If every one of us takes upon ourselves to every day increase just one good thought, one positive word to someone around us, beginning with our families, our wives, our husbands, our kids, our parents, our siblings, our neighbors, although it might be conflicted and so on and so forth, but the darkness is palpable, we must turn on the light. One good thought, one good word, one good deed, however small it is, could turn the tides. It's difficult, yes, but we are the people of light. We should all be blessed to be going out of Egypt, whatever that Egypt looks like for us, and to be able to celebrate Pesach in Israel together with all of our people.